It's nice to see you. I'm glad you could make it. How it is already time for another July wrap up, I don't know. And I feel like I say that at the beginning of every single monthly wrap up because I just feel like time has been flying. I feel like when I count my month in books read and like do these wrap ups, I feel like the months fly by. But then also I have read 11 books in the case of this month. So there has to be a decent amount of time in a month for me to be able to do that because I'm not the fastest reader in the world. That being said, welcome to the July wrap up. Honestly, July was a really good reading month. I feel like it was really good. Looking back, I feel like I found a lot of new favorites, a lot of new releases I was finally able to read, all that jazz. We're gonna get into all of that. In terms of the stats for what I read for the month of July, I read five and a half romances. There's one that I don't know if it counts as a romance. I'm not entirely sure. Like it has romance, but maybe it's women's fiction. I'm gonna put it as 5.5 for romance, but know that there's like a clean number of books. You know what I mean? And then I also read 5 thrillers, which is I think the most thrillers I've ever read in an entire month. If you guys didn't know, I drove all the way to Prince Edward Island from Toronto, which is like a 20-ish hour drive, a little bit less, a little bit more, depending on where you go. It's 1,800 kilometers. So it's a pretty long drive. And I listened to audiobooks for pretty much the entirety of that drive, and there's nothing I like more than a thriller audiobook. So I did in fact read, if you consider audiobooks reading. I do, but if you don't, I won't die on that hill. If you think it's not reading, that's totally fine. I understand it's not the act of reading, but if I know everything that happened in the page of a book, I read it. That's kind of where my head is at, but I will not die on that hill. Don't even worry. So we have 5.5 romances. Let me get back on track. 5.5 romances, maybe 6, maybe 1 women's fiction, 5 thrillers, and 1 fantasy, which I am not a fantasy in the summer kind of girly, so I'm not surprised by that at all. I would say I'm surprised by the thrillers though, because it's not October, and I feel like that's the only time I've ever really read thrillers at this capacity, but also trying to keep my attention in that long of a drive, there was nowhere else I could go but thrillers. Started off the month with A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston, and I've heard so many contradicting things about this book, so many yeses, so many nos, and I was pleasant about this book. That's not that I could have said nothing and accomplished more. You wouldn't know from that sentence that I just gave you that I gave this book a 5-star rating, and I did give this book a 5-star rating. Everything Ashley Poston does, I want to say I was pleasantly surprised by it, but I wasn't surprised. I was expecting to love it. Everything she does, everything she touches, everything her pen touches is just gold in my opinion. I feel like she writes specifically for me. Just the way that she writes just hits a spot that I cannot explain. I've seen a lot of people saying that they can't really connect to the romance in this, and while I kind of see it, I don't agree. I don't disagree necessarily. I just didn't have that experience. You're totally entitled to your experience. I feel like if I had to tier rank all of Ashley Poston's books, this one would be on the bottom, but of the 3, like the other 2 are 6-star reads, Love Them With Everything In Me. This is still such a strong 5-star for me. I feel like I've posted this quote on all of my platforms like 97 times at this point, but she compares in this book having a good feeling to the sound of closing your new favorite book. Like it feels like such a love letter to romance readers. Our main character Elsie looks forward to every single year the book retreat she goes on with her book club, but this year life has happened for everyone and no one can go except for her, and she is like, I am hanging on by one singular thread, and it is that we are doing this book retreat, so I'm gonna go alone. She's going through it a little bit and she's like, I'm gonna go alone. I've been looking forward to this for far too long. I'm going alone. So against maybe her better judgment, she gets in her not so great car and leaves to go on this solo little book retreat, only to be stopped in a little town by really bad weather. Little does she know, she will be waking up in the town, in the world of her absolute favorite romance series, and all the characters are gonna be there. Like, name something more romance girly book coded in the entire world, because you cannot. This satisfied something in me as a romance reader, as a reader in general, just that I cannot put into words. And while that was definitely the shining star of the book, I still really like the romance and the characters and the female friendships in this, and like how she explains how the characters have been there for her in her hardest days. There were tears. Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. This is the first of many audiobooks from this month. And in true Lisa Jewell fashion, I loved this so much. I think the thing that I love so much about Lisa Jewell's thrillers is they're not terrifying. I feel like this would be kind of more where you would deem like a psychological thriller. Don't ask me where things fall genre-wise. I have literally no idea. It's just a best guess every single time. And the reason I say that is because going into these books, you kind of have an idea from the beginning, like what is gonna happen, or like at least pretty early on, like you know what's gonna happen. You're pretty sure what has happened. There's not like crazy twists and turns necessarily. It's more like you know what's gonna happen. You just don't understand how we're gonna get there. And then you get there and you're so enthralled in the story and you put it down and you finish it and you sit back and you're like, what the fuck just happened? What What do you mean? That was so fucked up. That's the best way I can explain her books. I had the exact same experience with this, and none of this was true, and I will definitely be reading, or at least listening, to so many more of her books. We're following our main character, Laurel, whose daughter has gone missing 10 years ago, and obviously that has ripped apart her entire life, her entire family. Her and her husband have gotten divorced. She has a strained relationship with her other children. Little to find that she meets a man for the very first time, and she meets her daughter, and she looks so much like her kid. So much like the Ellie that has gone missing. And I won't tell you anything else because it's a thriller and it's so fun to go in blind. Never Lie by Frida McFadden. I feel like this is one I feel like I hear people say they love a lot. Like, I feel like when people say Frida McFadden, this is one that people really like. This is my second time giving Frida McFadden a chance, and I have to say, did not do anything for me. I feel like I guessed every single twist of this. I don't know if it was because I was listening to it on audio and I have a problem of trying to solve them. Like, it was fine. I haven't thought about it a single time since. Looking back at the twists, like, they were pretty good twists. I just feel like I literally anticipated every single one of them. Like, I feel like I would get to the twist and I'd be like, yeah, I know. That's what I figured was gonna happen. We're basically in two point of views in this book. We're following a couple of newlyweds, and Trisha is the POV of that. And then, what is her name? I'm not lying, it's completely left my brain. Adrienne Hale. Dr. Adrienne Hale is our second point of view, and she was a psychologist who had New York Times best-selling books about all of her patients. Our newlywed couple is house shopping, and they end up wanting to go see this house in what ends up being extremely bad weather, and by the time they get there, there's absolutely no way they can get out, and they kind of have to hunker down in this house that they were going to see for the weekend, which turns out to be the missing therapist Adrienne Hale's house, where all of the audio tapes of every appointment this doctor ever did and the audio tapes she based her books on live, and I'll tell you nothing else so that you can go in blind. It was not my favorite thriller by any means. I did not really like The Housemaid by her. I guessed a lot of it, and then I guessed a lot of this. So I just, at this point, I didn't know if Frida McFadden was gonna be for me. The Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez. This is the second book in her first interconnected standalone series, and I have been waiting to read the series because I love everything Abby Jimenez does. I love the way she writes. I sound like a broken record saying it all the time, but I feel like she writes these cutesy rom-com books with emotional depth that just like tear at your heartstrings in ways that I cannot explain. This is the follow-up to The Friend Zone, so if you've read that book, I was really curious how this character's story could go. I felt so emotionally attached to what happened in the end of The Friend Zone that I was concerned going into this one, for lack of a better word. I feel like it was done so well. I don't want to say a lot about it because what facilitates this is the end of The Friend Zone. I will say this is probably my least favorite Abby Jimenez book, but it's still such a strong 4-star. Like, I was kicking, giggling. I loved it so much. The second of this audiobook came into my car after listening to thrillers before that, I was like, yeah, it's just the characters in the audiobooks speak like how I picture them speaking in my head. Like, these are these characters encompassed. I feel like she does emotional depth to characters like nobody else. I really liked it. This story was probably the most far-fetched in my opinion, and I still love everything Abby Jimenez does. It's just like everything that I read from her is so top tier that like this is not a miss. It's just at the bottom of a very long list of 5-star reads. We're following Salone and Jason, and Salone is going through it. She is going through it. And one day she is driving her car, and unbeknownst to her, her sunroof is open. And not only is her sunroof open in her car, but a dog has jumped in the sunroof and is now in the car with her. And now she's trying to find this dog's owner, and she cannot find this dog's owner. And she's like, I'm just gonna adopt you, until one day she finally gets a text back from his owner. It happens to be Jason, who is kind of on his like rock star journey era. And the moment that they start talking, the connection is really there. The way that the topics and what Salone is going through was dealt with this, I thought was done really well. I really enjoyed it. Like a really strong 4-star. Killjoy by Holly Jackson. I had like 2 hours, less than that, left in my drive, and I was like, do you think I could fit a 4th audiobook in? Like, could I try? And I did, because this one is absolutely tiny. I guess this actually comes technically before A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, and I've seen a lot of people online say like, read this before A Good Girl's Guide to Murder to see if you like the way that Holly Jackson writes, and I think I disagree with that because I did like this. It was like a good, fun, exciting audiobook. Like, I enjoyed it for what it was. I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much if I didn't know or care about Pip as a character. I do think if you've read the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series that you should read this because it's such an easy, fun read with like characters that you already love. But if you've not read anything in this world, it doesn't, in my opinion, set up for like what you're gonna get. We're basically following Pip and her friends on a murder mystery dinner party, and I thought something was actually going to happen, like an actual crime like we get in A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, but it's literally just a murder mystery dinner party. It really sets up Pip as a character. It shows up how Pip is a character really well, but it's literally a murder mystery dinner party. For what it was, it couldn't have been better. Reckless by Lauren Roberts. Okay, I've thought about this so much since finishing it. This was in my reading and releases video. I feel like I said my thoughts pretty well in that, but I feel like my opinion has even evolved a little bit more. I think first and foremost, I really like Lauren Roberts as an author. author. Like, I think it's really cool that she's like around my age and that she's on TikTok and that she wrote this book when she was 18, or the first book, she wrote Powerless when she was 18. Regardless, these characters have been with her for so long, and the fact of the matter is she wrote a romantasy for romantasy readers. I loved Powerless, I loved Powerful. The tears that I teared, completely indescribable. And I have now since learned about the second book in a series, Curse, and this did what it did well. It was written really well, it was entertaining. At this point, I will take absolute breadcrumbs from Kay and Payden. I say their names wrong every single time that I speak. From Kai and Payden every single day for the rest of my life. I would be so happy to just get breadcrumbs of them. I think the thing that made Powerless so good was that we get the romance and the banter, as well as this rather fully formed fantasy world, and this was kind of just the banter. Like, I stand on the statement, nothing happened. Not much happened. There were so many things that were just touched on and then we got away from. That being said, I did give it a 4, which is semi a generous 4. However, I enjoyed my time reading this. I just feel like it wasn't what I was expecting, and I trust Lauren Roberts' vision with everything in me. I trust that this was a breather book before the chaos of the third book. I'm so excited for the third book still. I'm excited to see where she takes the series. Is it what I was expecting? Absolutely not. But I loved what we got for what it was, because I will take anything from them. Is, I feel like, the best way I can sum up my thoughts. Love Unwritten by Lauren Asher shocked me. This book shocked me. I have read a decent amount of Lauren Asher at this point. I've read all the Dreamland Billionaire series, I've read the first book in the Dirty Air series, and I've read Love Redesigned. My opinion on Love Redesigned was that the moment that I finished it, I was like, wow, this is without a doubt Lauren Asher's best book. I was not gonna annotate it when I was reading it. I got 75 pages in, was loving it, and was like, I'm gonna annotate it because I'm loving it. Kind of forgot how much I liked it. And then I picked this up, and just like from the gate, the fond memories I have of reading this book from the gate was like, oh my god, I remember why I liked Love Redesigned, and I like this so much more. We're following Ellie and Rafa, and Raphael has a child named Nico. They both have pretty intense emotional trauma. I think this is the most trauma and like trigger warning-esque things that Lauren Asher has talked about, at least in what I've read of hers. I feel like she handled it really well. It gave the characters such emotional depth. The way that you connect to the characters in this book, I do not think could have been accomplished in anything less than the 600 pages that she did. That being said, I would not take a word, page, sentence, anything out of this. I felt like it was paced so well. I felt like I was flying through it. I love this with everything in me. And our other main character, Ellie, is Nico's, started as music teacher but is now his nanny. I won't give you a ton more than that because I want you to go in blind, kind of like I did. It was fun to go in blind. For context, if you've read Love Redesigned, Raphael is Julian from the first book's cousin, and it takes place in Lake Wisteria as well, the same as Final Offer. And just the tension in this tensioned so hard, and it was so the slowest of slow burns that made me realize why people love slow burn so much. I could rant and rave about this book for so long. I loved this so much, and I was really not anticipating to. I thought it was gonna be like, wow, this feels long, but it was good for what it was. And no, like, this is teetering on 6-star territory for me. I'm thinking about it so much. Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I was worried going into this because it was marketed as an erotic romance, and I was really worried we wouldn't get the tailored, perfect character development and story and plot line and banter and funniness that we get everything Ali Hazelwood, and I was wrong. I was wrong to be worried about that because the plot in this really did plot. I feel like the best way I can explain this, at least the way that I interpreted it in my head, is that if you swapped the science talk in all of Ali Hazelwood's other STEM romances with spice and spice talk in this book, that's what you get. You obviously have some spice in all of her other STEM romances, and you still have a decent amount of science talk in this. I mean, they're both working in the field, but I mean, that's the amount of spice that there is if you had to think of it like that. And then everything else you love about an Ali Hazelwood book is still so in there. I feel like the way that she explains it in her note in the beginning of this book, that is just like, this story might not be what you're expecting from me, because the trauma that the characters have gone through and like the place that they are meeting each other at right now makes it really hard to facilitate anything beyond a physical connection from the beginning. But don't worry, they will get their happy ending. And just the character growth in this, I felt very similarly to this that I felt about Jack and Elsie from Love Theoretically, where he was really facilitating her growth. I felt like everything that happened in this book, I feel like so much happened in like a pretty short amount of time. And the way that Eli is obsessed with this girl, and he falls first, he falls harder, like, it's so good. This man worships the ground this woman walks on. Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. I have a lot of thoughts about this. I was really pleasantly surprised by this in so many ways. The topics that were dealt with in this, the way that they were dealt with. This was just like such a fun, I don't even want to say fun. This was such a good read. This is my first Annabelle Monaghan book, and it definitely will not be my last. Our main character, Allie, is a professional organizer, and she has recently gotten divorced from her husband, who was just kind of just enough. Who, when she looks at it now, was just kind of just enough. There was not a lot there. It just made logistical sense. But now they're divorced and she cares nothing more about her children and making sure her children are happy and making sure they're well adjusted and they have everything they need. And she never thought that she would put on real pants again after everything that she has gone through. Little to know the first time that she puts real pants on again and she goes to the dog park, her dog decides to pee on a man who from the moment gives her the room to grow in ways I cannot explain. I felt like this was so perfectly paced and perfectly written. It's like the perfect medium between having really gorgeous, beautiful lyrical writing and sound bites, but being extremely to the point. Like there was so much in this that I did annotate, but it wasn't like entire paragraphs of flowery writing. It was just like punchy, to the point writing that just, oh, one sentence, it can really hit the nail on the mark. I loved this so much more than I was anticipating to. To everyone that recommended this to me, thank you. And if you're looking for a summer romance that is going to tear your heart out a little bit, this will do that. And it wasn't even the things that you think are going to tear your heart out. I felt like it was more general feelings of grief and of loss and of finding yourself again and of moving forward. And it wasn't necessarily you're crying for the characters, you're more crying peripherally the fact that that feeling exists. A way I can sum it up, if it made any sense. The Hotel Nantucket by Ellen Hilderbrand shocked me. I thought that this was going to be a very intense, interconnected standalone series of romances. Tell me why this is not that at all, and I loved every single second of it. The way that Ellen Hilderbrand put gossip in a book, exactly like Larry Reed said it in her video, the grannies were onto something. I feel like I saw Ellen Hilderbrand books constantly in my house when I was a kid, like my mom was reading them, and I just, when I got back into reading, was like, I can't imagine if my mom loves it that I'm gonna love it. But I've learned about my mom that my mom can get behind some gossip. I loved everything about this. We're basically following every character that you could possibly imagine, but it's done in a way, like in the beginning you're given so many names, but then you start getting in their point of views. It just happens so naturally that you understand the characters. Like, don't be intimidated by how many point of views are in this. It's very easy to follow. The Hotel Nantucket, which is obviously in Nantucket, where I'm pretty sure all of her books so far are based, has been bought out by this billionaire that nobody knows, and there's so much talk around the town about whether we're happy about this hotel being bought and redone by someone who's not from Nantucket because of all the history surrounding it. But you're following so many characters' point of views. It's kind of a mystery. Like, you're kind of questioning things. You don't know things about characters and then you're finding them out, and this felt like reading gossip columns, but you're involved with the characters and you care about them and just the atmosphere of Nantucket. I was kicking and giggling like for the stupidest reasons. You deal with family, friendship, romance, the characters, just the growth and just their lives. I loved it. Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson is a book that I read. I have absolutely no thoughts about this. I, looking back, was expecting to really like this. Like, I thought it was gonna be like a dark academia YA true crime-esque book, which like we got. I did not like it. I don't even know how to put my thoughts into words for this one. We're basically following this girl who has gotten into this very prestigious school that like 5 or 6 kids get accepted to every single year. And we're kind of hopping back and forth between the POV of the year that school opened and her now. And her interest is true crime and solving cases, and that's like her specialty, and that's like what got her into this school, because they all have like very specific niche specialty traits that have gotten them into this school. We're following the case as it happened when the school opened in 1937, and then her now trying to solve it. Every twist in this just felt like it came really out of left field. Like, there was no evidence leading up to it. I don't know what it was about it. I did not connect to it at all. I really realized listening to this that I loved A Good Girl's Guide to Murder and The Natural so much because I cared so much about the characters. I don't even remember a single one of their names, and I feel like that was the issue for me. I did say in my book club that I was reading this, and I had a lot of people say that this one was not very good, but that the series gets better. So I will read on, but I have like almost seemingly no thoughts about this. Like, I don't even know how to explain to you the fact that I read this book because I have quite literally less than a thought left with it. Okay, so now here's the book that changed things for me, okay? Ward D by Frida McFadden. I'm eating my words. I am eating my motherfucking words. This was like a good solid 4.5 star thriller read. I could not guess a single moment of this. I loved this so much. The twists and turns in this, A1, so good. I will recommend this to you with everything in me. Loved this one. And I went in, I was like, I'm gonna give Frida McFadden 3 chances and then I'm gonna call it. And man, did she show up for this 3rd chance. I went in trying to guess because I was like, I've guessed the other ones, I'm gonna try and guess these ones. And I couldn't guess anything. We're following a main character whose name I obviously don't remember. Amy. Amy is her name. This is my last read book for the month, so I read it most recently and I can't remember her name. Don't ask me to remember a name. I clearly cannot do it. And she is a medical student in her residency, and she has now come upon the time that she has to do her placement in Ward D, which is a psychiatric hospital, and she has to stay there overnight. Ward D is kept behind a really intense locked door that only her and the resident doctors have the passcode for, but she has to stay all night for her to get this pass for her residency. Little do we know, she does have a little bit of a past with her childhood best friend being in this hospital, and she is from the gate so nervous, so weirded out by this hospital, and you're kind of like, why babe, why? And then the moment you get, so much starts happening, but it ties up so well at the end. This was such a good thriller read that redeemed Freedom McFadden for me, and I will be reading on because of how this one had me literally squirming in my seat. And that was the 11 books that I read in the month of July. July was a really weird and chaotic month, so I'm really happy with everything that I read. I feel like I found some authors that I'm excited to read on with. I found some new favorite 5-star reads. It was a really good month. I will take months like this every single month if I could. Let me know if you guys have read any of these and what your thoughts were, or what book was your favorite from July, because you know I'm always trying to add to the never-ending TBR. And I hope to see you in the next one. Love you. Bye.